I'm Karen Gill. I'm an alcoholic. It is through the grace of God, the power of Alcoholics Anonymous, and sponsorship that I've been sober since May 30th, 1982. And thank you. And my home group is the Pacific Group in West Los Angeles, California, the biggest AA group in the world, a group that I'm very, very proud to be a member of, just as I'm sure you're proud to be a member of yours. If you're new in this room tonight, I want to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous, God's magnificent AA, the program that saved my life, and it's going to save yours too. And if you're willing to take some real quick actions, and I suggest that you get a sponsor, that you get that book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and that you get busy and do what everybody else is doing around here. And you're going to stay sober as I've stayed sober for 9.5 years. And people like me cannot stay sober, I can tell you. I want to thank my baby Karen for coming with me from California for this conference. And actually, she's out here looking for a relationship, I want you to know. But I'm just kidding. Karen and I flew out of LAX in Los Angeles, and we flew to Chicago, and much to our sheer delight, 110 eighth graders got on the airplane with us, and neither one of us had slept all night and stuff, and you know, my eyes were rolling around in my head by the time I got off that airplane. And then we ran into our favorite eighth grader, Nick, that belongs to your groups up here, and I want to thank Nick for being such a magnificent host for us. And he picked us up at the airport, and I knew we were in bad trouble when he said, "Oh, I'm glad to see that you girls carried on your luggage." And we said, "No, we have 5 suitcases that need to be picked up." And he said, "Oh, God, why do women have to carry all this stuff, you know?" So we had to slap him around a little bit in the car on the way over here, but we took care of him. I want to thank Kathleen and the committee for inviting me to come and share my life here tonight. This is an honor and a privilege, and it's one that I do not take lightly, I'll guarantee you. You guys, I love Alcoholics Anonymous, I really do, and I think that it shows, and I make an awful lot of mistakes here, and I do an awful lot of things wrong, but I'll tell you one thing, that I love you, make no mistake about that. I've been taught to do an awful lot of things before I ever open my big mouth, and one thing is to talk to my sponsor, and Clancy sends you his love and very best wishes from Los Angeles tonight. And I talked to my sponsor, and I said, "What do you want me to talk about tonight?" And he said the same thing to me that he always says to me: "Quit trying to be cute, Karen. Get up there and share your experience, your strength, and your hope, and tell those people what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Ignore the old-timers. They've already got this program. They don't need your inspiration. And you talk to those new people who are the life and blood of AA." And I believe that as I stand up here tonight, and I welcome you, and I hope that you stay. And then I did the most important thing I think I can ever do before I ever open my big mouth, and that's to say, "God, please help me say what you want me to say to these people." God is very much a part of my life tonight, and it did not used to be that way for me, let me tell you. You know, I'm standing up here tonight, and I've nice dinner, I've got a pretty suit on, you know, and I've had a wonderful weekend, and I can tell you that it was not always like that for me. The day I got sober, I weighed 95 pounds, I was the color of squash, I had an alcoholic hepatitis, I had a liver cirrhosis, I had ruptured esophageal varices, and if you don't know what that stuff is, you don't want to know what it is, because you die from that kind of stuff. And I was standing on Skid Row in Lincoln, Nebraska, sucking on a bottle of Mad Dog. And if you guys haven't drank Mad Dog, I need to tell you it is not one of your finer wines, I can tell you that. And I was standing there thinking to myself, how in the hell did this happen to me? I never once wanted this to happen. And, you know, I had lost my children, I'd lost my nursing license, I'd lost my husband twice, although I didn't really care about that, I want you to know. I'd lost my car, my house, I'd destroyed every relationship I'd ever had with anybody in my whole life. And I was clearly dying from alcoholism. And one more time tonight, I know how cunning and baffling and powerful this thing is. This is not a game that I'm playing up here. This is serious business. And people do indeed die from alcoholism. And it did not start out my life being like that for me, you guys. I come from basically a very lovely, lovely home. And I want you to know that, and my mother wants you to know it too, I can tell you that. And I was talking to my mom before I left California. I talked to her every single week from LA to Lincoln, Nebraska, and she said, "What are you going to do this weekend?" And I said, "Mom, I'm going to go out to Maryland and give an AA talk." And she said, "Maryland?" She said, "Oh, for God's sakes, don't get up there and tell those people all that stuff about you. They're not going to like you." And I always say, Mother, the rottener you are in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more people love you. And she said, I don't understand that. And I said, you don't have to understand it. And she said, and don't tell those people that you're afraid, because they don't like people that are afraid. And I always say, Mom, the more afraid you are in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more people love you. And she says, one more time, I don't get it. And I said, Mom, you don't have to get it. Why would she? She's not an alcoholic. And then, you guys, she always tells me this, and I prod her into it at any given opportunity. What she says to me is, I'm going to tell you something, young lady. You come from good stock, and we don't air our dirty laundry in public. And I always say, Mom, it's not dirty anymore, and she doesn't understand that either. I obviously have a mother that does not understand alcoholism. I love my mom very, very much, you guys, and she's a beautiful, sophisticated, elegant woman. And my mother was hospitalized because of me and put on drugs because of me, and I have not forgotten that as I stand up here tonight. You know, I come from a lovely home, but I also need to tell you that I come from an alcoholic home, and I don't think that's neither here nor there. I don't do well with people that stand at AA podiums and blame anybody for anything. And my dad was an alcoholic, you guys, and I loved my father very, very much. And my dad died from alcoholism on the streets of Chicago in 1979 on Skid Row. And my dad was a major in the Air Force, and my dad was a magnificent individual. And he would have loved Alcoholics Anonymous, I got to tell you. And I don't know if my dad ever found this program or not, but I know that he certainly did not stay sober as a result of it, and did indeed die from this disease. And I have a sister who was Miss Rah-Rah in high school, and she was homecoming queen and cheerleader and all that kind of crap, and made straight A's and never cracked a book, and I made straight F's and never cracked a book, and that was the difference. And I was very, very jealous of my sister when she was growing up. She was a beautiful little girl, and she's a gorgeous woman today. She looks nothing like I do, I can assure you. And she was a model for Neiman Marcus for many, many years in Dallas, Texas, and just retired here recently. Now she's teaching school in the West Indies. And I got to tell you that as a direct result of Alcoholics Anonymous, I love my sister very, very much today. And I found out something recently about my sister. She's also very beautiful on the inside, too, and I never used to know that. I have a brother who's a pilot in the Navy who just got home from Operation Desert Storm, who was in that first attack over there. And I am so grateful that that war is over with. You have no idea. Neither one of these people are alcoholic. I have another sister who's married to the public defender in Lincoln, Nebraska, who got me out of one hell of a bunch of trouble when I got sober. And I'm welcome in their homes today, and I never used to be. If anybody's wondering why I have Clancy for a sponsor and why I have a man for a sponsor, it's really quite simple. I did not get sober in California. I got sober in a place called Lincoln, Nebraska, which I used to think was just a terrible place to get sober. And I've changed my mind about that. I think that any place in AA is a good place to get sober. I'm just glad I don't live there anymore, I want you to know. But anyway, I wasn't doing well in Alcoholics Anonymous in Lincoln, Nebraska. I went through 19 sponsors at a rapid clip, and I'm one of these people, I don't take direction very well, I'm sorry to say, and I'm not particularly proud of it as I stand up here tonight. And thank God for the old-timers in Alcoholics Anonymous, because somebody loved me enough to get me to my current sponsor. And I got to tell you that my life has done nothing but totally, completely turn around as a result of that. I love that man more than any human being in the whole world, and I'm sure that you're going to see why by the end of my talk. I have a couple kids that are 29 and 30 years old, and I know I certainly don't look old enough to have kids that age, but by God I am. And this is where it really starts getting interesting for me. I come from basically a very boring family, if you want to know the truth, and I go for colorful, exciting people that get themselves into a lot of trouble, apparently. That's why I'm in this program. But anyway, these kids are anything but boring, I got to tell you. They're a couple of jerks, if you want to know the truth, and I love my kids very, very much. Please don't get me wrong, but they are indeed a couple of jerks. My oldest son's an alcoholic. He's in Nebraska right now, just beating the hell out of this disease, and just got picked up 3 months ago for his number 9th drunk driving charge, and one more time he's gotten out of it. It never ceases to amaze me, the crap that we get away with, and I guess he's got a good attorney, too, and I know that I'm the last person in the world that can help that kid. I can just be an example to him and keep my mouth shut, and that's what I try and do. I have another son who's not an alcoholic. He's not a drug addict or anything like that. He's just goofy is what he is. And I love to tell this story because it shows you exactly how my life goes. I got the strangest phone call from this son of mine about 5 years ago in Los Angeles, and he said, "Mom, I'm getting married tomorrow." And I thought, getting married tomorrow, it was a surprise to me that anybody would even have him, you guys, if you want to know the truth. And I said, Jeff, why do you call me the day before the wedding and expect me to be back in Nebraska? I said, the Pope's in Los Angeles. I doubt if I even get a flight out of here. And he said, Mom, I don't expect you to come. It's just going to be a tiny little wedding. Don't worry about coming. Well, you know, you don't tell people like me that stuff. I wanted to be there. And I couldn't get a flight out of Los Angeles. I was right about that. And I talked to my sponsor about it. I was just in a twit. You have no idea. And Clancy told me, well, what the hell are you going to do? Walk? If you can't go, you can't go. Now shut up about it. That's the kind of direction I get from my sponsor. And so anyway, I shut up about it, and I talked to my mom the day after the wedding. And I said, Mom, how'd the wedding go? And she said, well, it was very lovely. But who was that little girl with them? And I said, what little girl? And she said, well, apparently Jeff's got a 4-year-old daughter that you don't know anything about, and I suggest you call your son and talk to him about it. And I got to tell you that I was more than happy to do that, make no mistake about that. And I called Nebraska, and I said, Jeff, how'd the wedding going? He said, well, it was very nice, Mom. And I said, who was that little girl with you guys? And he said, Mom, that's my daughter. And I said, why didn't you tell me that I had a grandbaby? I was so upset with him. Not because I had a grandbaby, because I did not know about it. And he said, Mom, I was afraid you'd get drunk. And I thought, get drunk? I wouldn't have gotten drunk over that. At least I don't think I would have. See, that's what I mean. He's goofy is what he is. And I was on the first thing smoking out of Los Angeles, California to get home and meet my little granddaughter. And I got to tell you guys that this little girl is the apple of my eye. She is the icing on the cake. Her name is Brandy, and doesn't that just figure? And she walked up to me at the airport, and she said, are you my grandma? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, well, you know, you're my favorite grandma. And see, that's what I want to hear. That's the stuff I strive for. And I said, Brandy, why do you say that? You don't even know me. And she said, because you wear ribbons in your hair, and grandmas don't wear ribbons in their hair. And I thought, well, that's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard, but I'll take whatever I can get here. And I absolutely adore her. I flew her out to California a couple years ago to give me a cake at my number 7th AA birthday, and she flew out from Nebraska by herself. We have a family meeting Saturday night in the Pacific group, and people from all over the world come and give their family members cakes and stuff. And so I flew her out there, and I thought she'd be terrified to be on that airplane by herself, but I was wrong about that. She got off that plane like she owned it after sitting in the cockpit with the pilot the whole trip, and I knew I was going to be in bad trouble because this little girl never shuts her mouth for 2 minutes, and I'm not used to being around little kids, and this weekend I was around a little kid, Nick, you know, but anyway, I knew I was going to be in bad trouble, and I said, Brandy, do you ever be quiet? You're giving me a headache. And she said, Grandma, I have a lot to say, and if you don't like it, take some aspirin, you know. I think that we have a prospective member of Alcoholics Anonymous on our hands there. I hope I'm wrong about that. I stood in Lincoln, Nebraska 2 years ago, and I looked at my second grandchild, a beautiful baby boy that was born to my son and his wife. And I got to tell you guys that tears of gratitude rolled down my cheeks because I should not have been standing there. And I stood there 6 months ago, and I looked at my third grandchild, another beautiful baby boy that was born to that alcoholic son of mine and his wife. And one more time, the tears were rolling. Things with my family are very, very good today, and it is only a direct result of Alcoholics Anonymous, I can assure you. You guys, when I was growing up, I was a disruptive jerk is what I was. Always in trouble, always getting kicked out of classrooms. I hated discipline. I was very, very rebellious. I literally hated people telling me what to do. And I like it even less today, if you want to know the truth. And if you can imagine having Clancy for a sponsor and being like that, I'm sure you can imagine it. And, you know, I never felt like I belonged anywhere. And I hear that a lot from AA podiums. And it seemed to me like everybody around me was doing very, very well, and I was doing totally just the opposite. And, you know, my mom and dad were at that school all the time getting me back into school, and they used to say things to me like, why can't you act like the rest of this family? Well, hell, I didn't know why. They bored me. You know, I just never felt good anywhere that I was. And I really don't remember my first drink, you guys, but I can tell you that I hope to God I never forget my last one, and I hope it was my last one. But I remember what alcohol did for me from the very beginning. It made me feel like I belonged, and I could be anything I wanted to be, and I could do anything I wanted to do. And I drank at any given opportunity after that, and I was probably about 13 years old. I realize that I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous tonight, and I honor that. I identify myself as an alcoholic from this podium. I'm also a drug addict, too. And to make that a small part of my story, my sponsor encourages me to do that. And when I was growing up in Lincoln, Nebraska, there was not a lot of drugs on the street. But I'll guarantee you that I found every single one of those drugs. And there was some marijuana and speed and stuff. And, you know, today if you get caught for possession of marijuana, you get a ticket. Big deal. When I was growing up, you went to prison is what happened to you. And that didn't scare me. Nothing scared me. I did everything I was not supposed to be doing. I'm one of these alcoholic females, and I hate to say this from an AA podium, but it's precisely the way that it was for me. That if you pat me on the head, my pants fall off is what happens to me. And I got myself into a hell of a lot of trouble when I was growing up, let me tell you. You know, people are really sick in here, aren't they? You know, men have been my downfall my whole life, I'm sorry to say, and it continues to be that way for me today, I'm also sorry to say. But anyway, I got pregnant when I was 16 years old, and I had to get married. And as it must be, I married an alcoholic. Don't most alcoholic women? I go for colorful, exciting men that beat the hell out of you and all kinds of stuff, I guess. And I grew to hate this man very, very much. And I'm not blaming him for my disease, so please don't get me wrong. It's just part of my story, and I need to share it. And he wasn't even a man, you guys. He was only 17 years old. And I was 16. I couldn't cook, I couldn't clean, I couldn't take care of a baby, nor did I want to take care of a baby. And before we knew it, we had 2 babies to take care of. You know, in retrospect tonight, I can see that that marriage never should have been to begin with. But anyway, like I said, I grew to hate him very, very much, and he refused to work and stuff. He drank on a daily basis, and somebody in that family had to work. And I found a job as a nurse's aide at a hospital there in Nebraska. And for the first time in my life, I began to respect and admire something. And it's called nursing, and I had that respect and admiration today, too, by the way. And those nurses taught me how to be a good nurse's aide. And I was falling in love with this profession little by little, day by day. And that job became the center core of my very existence and became more important than my family, anything. And I'm not saying that that's right. It's just the way that it was for me. And I made a plan to myself. I would love to go to school, and I would love to become a registered nurse. That's what I would love to do. You know, they say that alcoholics don't have willpower. And I'm here to tell you tonight from this podium that that is just crap. I have more willpower than 20 elephants. When I want to do well, I am going to do well. I didn't have any willpower as far as my disease goes, but when I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And I went back and I finished junior high, and I finished high school, and I went to college full-time for 4 years, and I worked full-time for 4 years. And I'm talking about 18, 20 hours a day, you guys, and that is hard stuff to do. This man did not help me 1 inch of the way. As a matter of fact, he fought me every inch of the way. I did not drink. I did not use any drugs. During this period of time, at the age of 27 years old, I became a registered nurse. And if you think I'm proud to stand up here tonight and tell you that I got jerked in front of the State Board of Nursing in Nebraska, and they told me, you are a disgrace to your profession, you're a disgrace to nursing, you're a disgrace to medicine, and you are no longer working because we just jerked your nursing license. If you think I'm proud of that, you are sadly wrong. You guys, I love my profession, and I would never do anything to jeopardize the people that I take care of, nor the people that I work with under ordinary circumstances. And what I have to tell you tonight is a story about how I threw it right down the toilet so I could drink. And that is total insanity is what it is. It's also called alcoholism. And anyway, at the age of 27 years old, I went to work in an operating room. And I drank, and I ran around with medical people mostly. They were colorful, intense people. They worked hard, and they played hard. And you know, the incidence of alcoholism amongst the medical profession is tremendously high. And that ought to do a lot for your security level if you're going to have surgery next week. But it happens to be very, very true. And I grew to love these people very, very much. And I drank and ran around with the same people for 15, 20 years. And they're so grateful that I'm sober that they can't see straight. And I'm talking about alcoholics. At the age of 27 years old, I made a plan to myself. I am divorcing this man, and I'm getting the hell out of this marriage. And girls, I got to tell you that a whole new world opened up to me, and it's called men and alcohol. And let me tell you, I went absolutely hog wild. And, you know, I felt like I had a lot of lost time to make up for it, if anybody can identify with that. And I was engaged 8 times during this divorce. I never did marry any of these people. 2 of them died from alcoholism, for Christ's sakes. You know, I don't know anything about social drinking. I drank, I ran around, I became engaged to alcoholics. And we do indeed die from this. And anyway, I went to work in this operating room and stuff. I was divorced. I could do anything I wanted to do. And I was starting to get myself into a little bit of trouble, I can tell you. And my kids were in trouble and stuff. And, you know, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says that we're to tell in a general way what our drinking was like. And you're going to get the general idea real quick about what my drinking was like. We have a little town in Nebraska, and it's called Palmyra, Nebraska. And it's a town of 200 people. And I can tell you from personal experience in that town of 200 people that they take a dim view of naked women walking on their highways, I can tell you that. And I woke up out of a blackout. The last I remember was being at the horse races in Omaha with a couple of nurses that I worked with, and the girls told me, they said, Karen, the horse races have been over with for 3 hours. We're all drunk, let's go back to Lincoln. And I said, well, run along. I'd met 2 guys from Council Bluffs, Iowa, and these guys wanted to take me to a party. And like I said, you pat me on the head and I'll follow you anywhere. And my friends went back to Lincoln, and I went to this party. And I really can't tell you much about this party, nor the people I was with. All I know is that I woke up out of a blackout on Highway 2 in Palmyra, Nebraska, stark naked, walking down the highway in my high heels, carrying my purse. And it was February in Nebraska, and it's a tad bit nippy out there in February in Nebraska to be doing that. And tonight I know why ducks' feathers freeze, I can tell you that. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I going to do? You know, well, what do? You walk is what you do. And of all the luck, the first person I ran into was a state pig. And, you know, in Nebraska, the cops travel by themselves. They don't have a partner. Out in California, they're a little bit smarter than that. And this guy stopped his squad car, rolled down his window, turned on his siren, and he looked at me, and he said, what in the hell are you doing? And I thought, well, that's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard anybody say. It's quite obvious what I was doing. And he said, lady, you get in this squad car, and you sit down, and don't you touch me. And, you know, one thing about a person like myself, every time I'm in trouble, I would do one thing more to make it worse every time. And I looked at this cop and I said, I'm not getting in your squad car because you might try and rape me. And he said, lady, I wouldn't bet any money on it. You are absolutely disgusting is what you are. And I'm here to tell you guys that that made me madder than anything that was going on, to show you how sick I was. I was in so much trouble, and I just add right to it, I can tell you. And anyway, he had to get a matron out from the Palmyra, Nebraska City Jail to come out there and get me, and that woman was not pleased, I'll guarantee you. They were very busy that night at that downtown jail, and they did not have time for this foolishness. And I went downtown, booked for indecent exposure, for assault and battery, for kicking in this guy's windshield, for hitting her, for hitting him, all the delightful little antics that we pull as practicing alcoholics. And I'll never forget how humiliating it was in that courtroom. The very next morning, when I went downtown, booked in this cop's raincoat, for Christ's sakes, and there I was sitting in the raincoat, and my brother-in-law, the public defender in Lincoln, who did not know I was in that courtroom, came up to me and he said, Karen, have you lost your marbles or what? Why would you do something like this? And you guys, I looked at my brother-in-law, and I was to say this to many, many people in my drinking career in many, many courtrooms. I said, oh, for Christ's sakes, Dennis, this could happen to anybody, you know. And we all know better than that. Boy, denial is the name of the game here, I'll tell you. And, you know, I just shirked that off like it was no big deal. If you're going to drink, these are the things that are going to happen occasionally. So what, you know? And that cost me about $3,000 to get out of that. And anyway, I'll never forget what it felt like to wake up in the very hospital that I worked at in surgery. And one more time, I'd been to the horse races. You know, for a number of years, I thought the horse races were my problem. It certainly was not my drinking. And I'm one of these alcoholic females with a big mouth when I drink, and I have a big mouth in sobriety, but I can tell you that it's getting a lot better. Pain is the teacher here. And I'd smart up to some guy at that horse race track, and he belted me right in the teeth is what he did. And a plastic surgeon was standing over me putting 18 stitches in my mouth. And I'll never forget what this surgeon said to me as long as I live. He said, Karen, we love you so much, and you are such a good nurse. You know, let's send you to a treatment center. We think you're an alcoholic. And get this drinking problem taken care of so you can get on with your life. And you guys, I looked at this surgeon, and I could not believe the audacity this man had that he would say that to me. And I said, just fix my lip and get the hell out of my face. I'll drink if I want to drink, and that's exactly what I did. And the drunk driving charges and the bad checks and all the stuff that we eventually do. And my kids were in trouble and stuff. And you know, I thought to myself, I can't marry any of these guys. They keep dying, for Christ's sakes, you know. And I thought, I need to get married to my ex-husband again. That's what I need to do. And that's got to be the stupidest thing I've ever done in my whole life, I got to tell you. You know, if anybody in this room is thinking about getting married to the same person twice, don't do it. You're going to be sorry. The only way I can describe it is it's like taking a bite out of the same turd twice, if you will. And, I'm sure he feels the same way I do. As a matter of fact, I know he feels the same way I do. And I married that man again with two intentions in my mind, and one was to get even with him for all the things that he had done to me, and the second reason was that my kids needed their father. And those are not very good reasons to get married, I can tell you. I'm not particularly proud of it as I stand up here tonight. But anyway, I danced that man through 3 of the most miserable years of his life on the face of this earth. And I love to tell you this story I'm about ready to tell you. And my sponsor always tells me that is not funny, and you should not be telling that from AA podiums. And I always say, okay, Clancy, I won't tell it anymore. And he said, no, go ahead and tell it. Let those people see how sick you really were. And I'm still sick, and I still think it's funny, so I'm telling the story. When I married this guy again, I told him, I said, if you ever hit me again, buddy, I'm going to kill you the next time you hit me. And he said, Karen, I'll never hit you again ever. And I said, you better see that you don't. And he lied is what he did. And he came home drunk one night, and I was sober that night for some reason. I'll never know why, because I usually wasn't. And girls, you know what guys do when they come home drunk. They want to take you to bed and stuff. And I was not buying it. If there's anything I can't stand, it's some drunk man mauling me when I'm sober. And I will say that when the shoe's on the other foot, though, it's fine with me. And this guy came home and indicated that to me, and I said, you get your hands off me and leave me alone. I wanted nothing to do with him, period. And he broke my arm is what he did. And I'm here to tell you that I was pissed. Make no mistake about that. As a matter of fact, I'm still pissed about it, if you want to know the truth. And I told this guy, I said, you go to sleep on that couch, buddy, and so help me God, when you wake up, you're going to wish you'd never been born. And he sat up for hours, you guys, with his eyes pried open. As it must be, he finally passed out. And I started drinking martinis, and this is a classic example of what alcohol did for me. Alcohol told me what to do. I didn't tell it what to do. And I was sitting there watching that guy, and I had about 8-10 martinis, and I was feeling no pain. And I thought to myself, what can I do to get even with this guy for all the things that he has done to me? And I hate to tell you what this man was doing, but I can't tell you the story unless I tell you what he was doing. He was laying on the couch playing with himself. And I thought, you disgusting man, you make me sick to my stomach. And the more I drank, the madder I got. And, I'm a nurse, and I'm very familiar with male anatomy. And I would be very familiar with male anatomy if I wasn't a nurse. But anyway... Then I committed the cardinal sin that none of us should ever commit. I started thinking. And we should never drink and think at the same time. One or the other, but not both at the same time. And in my alcoholic, brilliant mind, came up with this wonderful idea. My kids had just gotten some super glue, you guys. And this was about 18 years ago when super glue first came out, and it was powerful stuff. And you did not want to screw around with super glue. And I knew that this stuff worked real well because my kids were nailing down everything in the house that wasn't moving. And I got that super glue out, and I read the directions on that super glue. And like I said, I was drunk, and I wasn't seeing very clearly. And what I thought those directions said were, if this hits human skin, you better get it off within 15 hours. Now, why in the hell would it say that? What it said was, in fact, if this hits human skin, you better get it off within 5 minutes, is what it said. And I went over to this man in my drunken stupor, and I poured super glue all over this guy's groin, and I mean everywhere. There was not one place on this man that did not have super glue, and I laughed about it, and I went to bed. And I did not mean to hurt this guy as bad as I did. I swear to God that's true. But anyway, I woke up, and I don't know what I wanted to accomplish there. I just wanted to tug a little or something, and that's not what happened at all. And I woke up in the morning to screams of horror like you cannot even believe. And I'll tell you what happened to my ex-husband. This guy never had the advantage of being circumcised when he was born, and now he clearly was, I can tell you that. And, we had a telephone by our bed there in our bedroom there in Lincoln, and he called the police. And one thing you got to keep in mind here, they don't see things like this happen in Lincoln, Nebraska. In California, it would not surprise me one bit, but certainly not there. And he called the police, and the cops were out in front of our home with their sirens going. There was an ambulance out there. The neighbors were gawking out their windows. And I remember thinking to myself, I should not have done this. This was really stupid. And the cops were laughing, which led me to believe the whole thing was funny. And they said, lady, are you crazy or what? Why would anybody do anything like this? And I stood there and I said, what about my arm that he broke? It was always me, me, me. It was never about anything I did to anybody else. And they said, you're under arrest for assault and battery. And I said, you cannot arrest wives in Nebraska for assault and battery against their husbands. I knew better than that. And 2 days later, when I got out of jail, I guess I didn't know better than that. And they took that man to the very hospital that I worked at in surgery, and he had to have surgery. And one more time, the whole staff saw what Karen did, and it turned out to be a terrible, terrible thing. The doctors there in Lincoln couldn't get that glue off, and they had to get 2 surgeons down from Creighton University Medical School in Omaha to get that glue off. And, you know, there's a paper written about that at Creighton University Medical School in Omaha, Nebraska. I'd always wanted a paper written about me, but not like this, I got to tell you. And I was sitting in that jail thinking to myself, I'm getting the hell out of this marriage, because when this guy comes home from the hospital, he is going to glue something of mine shut, and he would have, too, I got to tell you. And I divorced this man one more time. And I will tell you on the brighter side of things here that Alcoholics Anonymous really does work, you guys, because my sponsor, Clancy, made me get on an airplane and fly to Sacramento, California, where my ex-husband lives with his new wife and stuff, and make amends to him. And I tried to tell Clancy, I am not sorry that I did that. Therefore, I don't have to make the amends, right? He said, I don't care whether you're sorry or not. Get on the airplane and get up there and do it. Maybe one of these days you will be sorry. And I don't need to tell anybody in this room that that guy backs up when he sees me, I got to tell you. And we were able to sit down and stuff, and I was able to make my amends there. And I can tell you that I walked away from that man, and I was free of what I had done to him. I was free of being married to him twice. And I can tell you that the promises in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous started coming true in my life when I made those amends. So I know that this thing works if you do it. At this time in my life, I got involved with the most bizarre man I have ever met before in my life. This guy told me he was in the mafia. Now, I don't think anybody in Lincoln, Nebraska is in the mafia, for Christ's sakes. And I was lying to him, and he was lying to me, and it was a nightmare is what it was. I was drinking on a daily basis. I was starting to take Valium for severe tremors I was starting to have, and it was starting to be no more fun to be doing any of it, I got to tell you guys. And you know, I love the bars, and I love the men, and I love the sex, and I love the musically like what goes on after the bars close, if you want to know the truth. And I can tell you that it was no more fun to be doing what I was doing now. And, you know, I'm a nurse, you guys, and I've studied alcoholism, and I knew all about it before I became one. And it shows me one more time tonight that self-knowledge does not mean one damn thing with this disease. It's action that counts. And that's the only reason I'm standing up here 9.5 years sober, I got to tell you. But anyway, you know, the day came for me when that hospital told me, they said, Karen, we have had all the crap we're going to take off of you. You know, I was starting to oversleep in the morning. I was calling in sick. I was doing things in my career that I had never done before. And they said, we cannot read any more in the paper about our nursing staff, gluing husbands, drunk driving charges, all the stuff that you're doing. Everything in Nebraska that you do is in the paper, you guys. And they knew my game, let me tell you. And they said, you're either going to a treatment center or you are fired. And you know, you don't tell people like me that stuff. I looked at these people and I made the biggest mistake I have ever made before in my life. I said, you and what army's going to make me go to a treatment center? And I walked out of there and I drank and I drank and I died and I died. I had just thrown the one thing that I loved more than anything in the whole world right down the toilet so I could drink. And I went to work at a nursing home there in Nebraska. And what I'm about ready to tell you, I am not proud to discuss from any AA podiums. It took me years into my sobriety before I would ever mention this. But if it would help somebody in this room tonight, my sponsor encourages me to do that. I found myself stealing drugs at that nursing home. I was stealing morphine and Demerol and cocaine and Valium and anything I could get my damn hands on. And if you think I'm proud of that, you are sadly wrong. And the day came for me, the people that ran that place, they came up to me and they said, Karen, what is wrong with you? You're just weird is what you are. You know, you're a good nurse and stuff, and you take good care of the patients, but you're just strange. And I remember thinking to myself, you'd be strange too if you had 200 milligrams of Demerol on board. You'd be strange too. And I threw my narcotic keys at them, and I walked out of the door before they fired me. And I went to work at Bryan Memorial Hospital in Lincoln, Nebraska. And you guys, it's a fine, fine hospital. And I was drunk on that interview, and I got that nursing position. And I don't mean I was falling down drunk. I was just maintaining a certain level in my bloodstream that I would not shake and have those tremors. And that is clearly desperation drinking, and our book describes that vividly. And I can tell you that the fun was all over with for me. And I kept that job for 6 months, vowing in my head, justifying in my head on a daily basis. I don't mean to steal these drugs. This is just a temporary thing. I'm not a bad person. This is the last time I'm going to do this. And we all know that that never happens for us. We never stop doing what we're doing. We just jump from the fat to the fire. And 6 months went by, and I got caught one day, the day I want to talk to you about, caught red-handed stealing some morphine from that hospital. And this has got to be the most humiliating day of my entire existence, when the people that caught me, they said, you give us your narcotic keys and you get the hell out of this hospital and don't you ever walk back in here again. You are a piss poor excuse for a nurse. We're reporting this to the State Board of Nursing in Nebraska. That's exactly what they did. That's exactly what they should have done, and my other two jobs should have done it too. And to make a long story short for me, you guys, I lost my nursing license. I had now thrown it right down the toilet, and there was no more, it was all over with for me. And to make a long story short for me, I wound up on the streets of Nebraska is what happened to me, and I spent 2 years on the streets, you guys, and I have traveled all over the Midwest. I've hitchhiked all over. I've prostituted myself. I've done anything I had to do to get that alcohol and drugs. And I can tell you that I hated myself so bad I cannot even begin to tell you. And I have seen and done things that no woman should ever see or do, I can tell you. And I'm still so sick in the head sometimes, I think to myself, I wouldn't mind seeing some of them again, And my sponsor assures me that I'm still a very ill person in this program to be thinking that kind of stuff. But anyway, 2 years went by for me, and I was in detoxes, I was in nut houses, I was in jails, I was in institutions. I cannot think of a thing that did not happen to me out there. And there I was back in Lincoln, Nebraska, standing on Skid Row, sucking on a bottle of Mad Dog. And I'll never forget this day. As long as I live, I'll never forget it. I remember thinking to myself, there was a Hilton Hotel adjacent to that Skid Row area there in Lincoln. And I remember thinking to myself, 2 years ago, I used to stand on top of the Hilton Hotel and drink martinis with surgeons. What am I doing standing on Skid Row drinking with these people? And I rather imagine those people felt the same way when they arrived there. And you guys, I really can't tell you much about that day at all. All I know is that I woke up in an intensive care ward of the very hospital that I was born at, that I worked at for 19 years, and I can tell you clearly that the alcoholic hell for me started the day I got sober. I'm not a very big person. I only weighed 95 pounds a day I got sober, and I was coming off a quart or whatever a day and 200 milligrams of Valium a day. And that's a lot of booze and that's a lot of pills, and I had a lot of dying to do. They say that most alcohol withdrawal is over with in 3 days, and maybe it is for some people, but it certainly was not for me. It was going to be a long, long time before I was going to start feeling better. And I found myself in that intensive care ward, and I had tubes coming out of my belly. They were draining fluid off my liver. I had IVs going, and the nurses were force-feeding me. And I just wanted to die is what I wanted to do. And obviously, I didn't do that right, because I'm standing here alive tonight. And I used to scream at those nurses and say, you get me some Librium, you get me some Valium, you get me something. This is absolutely inhumane that anybody should have to go through this kind of withdrawal. And if anybody in this room, went through that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I can tell you it is a terrifying experience. Every time I think about drinking at 9.5 years of sobriety, the thought of going through that again makes the hair on my neck stand straight up, I got to tell you. And it stops me every time. But anyway, let me tell you what these people did for me. And I will be forever grateful for this as long as I am sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. They got about 10 people from AA to come and sit with me. And these people never left me day or night for 1 solid month, you guys. I had somebody from AA with me at all times. And I grew to love these people very, very much. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about the loneliness that alcoholics feel. And I can tell you that there was nobody in my life the day I got sober, and my family was not buying this one either. And I can tell you that for the first time in a long time, people were back in my life again. And God, I love people, you guys, and I loved having people back in my life again. And these AA members sat with me by the hour. And they would say to me things like, Karen, just keep breathing. That's all you got to do is breathe. And I'd say, when is this withdrawal going to stop? And they said, when it's time, that's when it's going to stop. And that wasn't good enough for me. I wanted a date is what I wanted. And they couldn't give me a date. And they were absolutely accurate about that. When it's time, it's time. And I grew to love those people very, very much. A deep bond was set up with me with this program from the jump, I got to tell you. And at 30 days of sobriety, I walked into that official treatment program at that hospital. And if anybody in this room's been through treatment, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I was absolutely terrified, but by God, I wasn't going to let any of those people know it. And I felt a little bit better and stuff. And I walked into group therapy for the first time, and there was 14 men in that group, and they were all younger than I was. And I walked into that arrogant attitude that we have and stuff. And, I needed you so desperately on day one, but boy, at 30 days of sobriety, it was a whole different ball game, I got to tell you. And I walked in there, and this guy looked at me, and he said, you think you're better than everybody else here, don't you? And I made a comment to this guy that I was to pay for a long, long time in that treatment center. I said, yeah, you asshole, and you can put your name at the top of the list. in an inpatient 30-day program for 7 months, you guys, and that's a long time to be an inpatient 30-day program. And I completed that inpatient program, and I went to an evening care program, and I went to an outpatient program, and I went to an aftercare program. And I found myself a very, very active member of Alcoholics Anonymous in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I rapidly went through 19 sponsors, I got to tell you. You know, by this time I was doing it for the court system in Nebraska. That judge told me, he said, little girl, you're $58,000 in debt. You got $3,000 or $4,000 worth of bad checks to pick up here. And if you leave that treatment center, you're on your way to York Prison for Women. And if there's any doubt in your mind that I don't mean that, just try me. And there was no doubt in my mind that he didn't mean it, and I stayed there, I got to tell you. But I made people's lives miserable in that treatment center, and I am not proud of it as I stand up here tonight. I went through many, many counselors. I would tell the new people in Alcoholics Anonymous, you don't need a sponsor, and you don't need to get that book. We do whatever the hell we want to do around here. This is an individual program. And needless to say, I was not real popular with the old-timers in Lincoln, Nebraska. And you know, you guys, the old-timers in AA are so precious to me as I stand up here tonight. And I really do mean that. But I can tell you, in 1982, I could have cared less one way or the other what these people thought. And you know, you can pull your crap around here just for so long, and somebody's going to nail you. And this old guy had 29 years of sobriety. And he grabbed me out of an AA meeting one day, and he said, how dare you tell the new people they don't need to read the book and they don't need a sponsor? You don't even know what the hell you're talking about. Now, you stay away from the new people. He said, you're like a typhoid Mary in AA. Everybody dies around you, but you're able to stay sober somehow. And he said, you stay away from the new people. And he said, furthermore, there's going to be a man from California speaking in Kearney, Nebraska this weekend, and you're going to go up and hear this man speak. His name is Clancy. He's a master at working with people like you, and you're going to ask this man to be your sponsor. And I looked at this old-timer, and you guys, I'd heard all about Clancy, and I wanted nothing to do with him, period, because I knew I was going to be in bad, bad trouble. And I got to tell you that my fears have been justified 8,000 times over. But anyway, I told this old-timer, I said, who do you think you are that you're going to tell me who's going to be my sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous? He said, if you don't get in that car and go with us Saturday, I'm going to tell everybody in Lincoln how you stole money from an AA meeting. And I'll guarantee you I was in that car going to Kearney, Nebraska. And you know, for the old-timers in here tonight, I paid that money back too, by the way. But anyway, I found myself in Kearney, Nebraska. And I can tell you guys that from a podium in Kearney, Nebraska, that Clancy literally, and I mean literally, put the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous into my life. And I can tell you that my life has never been the same since that talk, because let me tell you what was happening for me. For the first time in my sobriety, I was identifying with another alcoholic. And as I understand Alcoholics Anonymous, that's what this thing is all about. And I knew what was wrong with me, and I knew what the hell I needed to do about it. And I ended up, by the end of that talk, wanting that man for a sponsor. And I turned to these people that I was with from Lincoln, and I said, you remember one thing, this was my idea, not yours. And I walked up to Clancy, and I asked Clancy to be my sponsor. And he looked at me, and I'll never forget this as long as I live, what he said to me. He said, I don't sponsor crazy people like you. And I thought to myself, why did he say that to me? He doesn't even know me. I was standing there in my little white dress on, my little white gloves on, acting like an angel. And I wasn't aware of the fact that these old-timers had called him 2 weeks prior to him coming to Nebraska, and he knew my game, let me tell you. And he said, Karen, you know, I really don't like to sponsor people on long-distance basis, but I'm going to do this for you because if I don't do it for you, you're probably going to go die somewhere. But he said, I'm going to say something to you, little girl, and you better listen to me real good because I'm going to say it one time and one time only. You're going to call me every day till I tell you not to call me every day. I don't care how much money it costs you to call me from Lincoln to L.A. If you don't like it, get 2 jobs, because that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to sponsor people. You're going to become an active, viable member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You are not going to lie to me. You're not going to defend your actions to me. And furthermore, you're going to do what these old-timers in Lincoln, Nebraska tell you to do. And if you don't want to do that, then get yourself a different sponsor. And you guys, you know, I understand language like that, I can tell you. And I wanted to shriek at this man, what an order, I can't go through with it. But I found myself saying 2 words that I almost fell over when I said them. I said, yes, sir. And I'll guarantee you that I say that today too. You know, respect's got to start for me somewhere. And it might as well start with my sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went back to Lincoln, Nebraska, and I became very, very active in the AA in the right way. And I wound up by sponsoring 56 women in that town. And I'm not bragging about that. It is not that much fun to sponsor 56 crazy women in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I got to tell you guys that those women, I grew to love them very, very much. And they literally showed me the first 4 years of my sobriety what to do and what not to do in this program. And every single one of those people are still sober today. And it's not because of me. It's because they're active, viable members of this organization. But anyway, I was starting to like Alcoholics Anonymous a little bit. And one of the first directions Clancy gave me, he said, I want you to get that nursing license back. And I tried to tell my sponsor, I cannot go through that kind of humiliation. And he said, are you arguing with me, Karen? And I said, no. And he said, get up to the State Board of Nursing in Nebraska and tell those people that you have been sober in AA for 2 years, that you would like the opportunity to get your nursing license back. And you guys, I knew it wasn't going to work, but I did it anyway. And I think that's the most important thing I can say from this podium tonight. I did what my sponsor asked me to do, whether I believed it would work or not. And I went into the State Board of Nursing in Nebraska, and I asked them for my license back. And they looked at me like I had just grown horns on the top of my head. And they said, how many links are you willing to go to? And I had to do a lot, you guys. I had to take crap off people for 2 years that I wouldn't hire to mow my own lawn, if you want to know the truth. And I had to keep my mouth shut in the process. And I got to tell you that one of the happiest days of my life occurred about 7.5 years ago, when one more time I was jerked in front of the State Board of Nursing in Nebraska. And what they told me literally brought me to my knees for the first time in Alcoholics Anonymous. What they said to me was, welcome home, you're fully reinstated as a registered nurse. And I can tell you guys that that is a gift from Alcoholics Anonymous. It is truly a gift. It's one that I do not deserve, but I will take it, I'll tell you that. And you know, I went out to California a couple times. I fell in love with Southern California AA, and I had to be part of it. And I told Clancy on the phone one day, I want to live in Los Angeles. I want to work at UCLA in the operating room. I want to be on 2 of their transplant teams, their heart and liver transplant teams. I want to live on that crazy Venice beach with all those crazy people. I knew I'd fit in there like a glove, and I've not been wrong about that either. And I want to belong to the Pacific Group, and I want this, and I want that. And every single one of those things have come true for me, you guys. And those are all gifts from Alcoholics Anonymous. I love this program so much that I cannot even begin to tell you how intensely I love it. I love it so intensely that sometimes it scares the hell out of me, if that makes sense. And I have a couple stories to tell you, and I'm going to sit down here. I don't want to go over. And these are stories that I love to tell, and I love to tell them to people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm sure that you're going to love them too. One of the first directions Clancy gave me, again, he said, Karen, where are you at with your spiritual program? And I said, what is this, some kind of a joke? I don't believe in God. I said, Clancy, I can't do that stuff. I just can't do it. And he said, Karen, listen to me. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says clearly that we get a daily reprieve contingent on a spiritual maintenance with a power greater than ourselves. And he also went on to tell me, furthermore, there's going to come a day in your life, in your sobriety, that you have no mental defense against that first drink. And I can't help you, AA can't help you, and God can. And you had better start doing something in this area, or you're going to be dead from the disease of alcoholism. And he said, I want you to start getting on your knees in the morning and getting on your knees at night. And I want you to pray for God's will. And you don't have to believe it, just do it. Just take the action. And I did what my sponsor asked me to do, you guys. And for 2 years I did that, and I didn't feel any connection with God. I felt like a fool doing it, if you want to know the truth. And in 1985, I found myself in the World Conference of Alcoholics Anonymous in Montreal. And if you haven't experienced a world conference in AA, in 1995, San Diego, it's going to be there. And God, I hope you get to go. It's a magnificent experience. It's one that none of us should ever miss. And I had driven up there from Nebraska with 4 people that I sponsored, and none of us could afford to go. The girls didn't even want to go. And I said, you're going anyway, because I can't afford to go by myself. And we certainly couldn't afford to stay in those big hotels and stuff. They were like $100 a night. And we had $200 apiece and no place to stay. But by God, we were going to that World Conference, and that's exactly what we did. And I found myself in a great big football stadium at that World Conference, and there was 56,000 sober alcoholics in that football stadium. And I was in awe of Alcoholics Anonymous, let me tell you guys. I was in awe of this program. And I looked around myself, and everybody was having a wonderful, wonderful time and stuff. And I looked down on the football field, and my sponsor was down there helping them practice for a flag ceremony. And I know this sounds real corny to the new people, but the longer I stay sober, the cornier I get for some reason. And alcoholics from all over the world carrying their national flags, and they were down there practicing and stuff. And I ran down to tell my sponsor hi. He introduced me to people from all over the world in Alcoholics Anonymous, you guys. And I'm from Nebraska, and I was impressed, let me tell you. And I'm impressed today when I meet people from all over the world in AA. And I ran back up and I joined my friends, and that flag ceremony started. And I will never forget this. As long as I live, I'll never forget this. When the United States of America's flag touched the turf of that stadium, I saw 56,000 sober people go absolutely crazy. And I looked around myself, and I did not see one dry eye in that football stadium. I saw those old-timers sitting around, the new people, and all the people in between. And they all seemed to be loving Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember thinking to myself, what is wrong with me? Why can't I love this program the way these people do? God, I wanted what you guys had. I wanted to be able to feel what you were feeling. And I just could not seem to achieve it somehow. And for the first time in my sobriety, I got tears in my eyes that I did not try and stop. And for the first time in my life, or in my sobriety, I talked to a God that I did not even believe in. And I said, God, thank you for getting me here. Please help me to stay here. Please help me to love Alcoholics Anonymous as much as these people do. I really, really wanted to feel the way you guys were feeling. And I can tell you that chills literally shot up and down my spine. And I can tell you that the feeling I got in that football stadium that night far out exceeded any feeling I have ever gotten from drinking or using drugs. And what they say is true, that Alcoholics Anonymous will replace your drinking. And it certainly has for me. And I can tell you guys that just for one solid minute, my world stopped. And I remember that woman who was standing on Skid Row, and she literally could not quit drinking. She literally could not. And here I was, 3.5 years sober, in a foreign country, in a foreign land. I came to believe, just like the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, we come to believe in a power greater than ourselves. And I came to believe that by watching and being with the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I apparently had seen enough and done enough that I was ready at that time. And I really believe the old adage that we see when we're ready to see and we hear when we're ready to hear. And I apparently was ready. And I have talked to that God every day sincerely since, because I believe what my sponsor has taught me. I get a daily reprieve, period. You guys, I work at UCLA in the operating room. I'm on 2 of their transplant teams, their heart and liver transplant teams. It's a magnificent job, but it's just a damn job is all it is. My sponsor has also taught me that God and AA have got to be the center core of my very existence. Not some man, not some job. It's God and AA, and everything else revolves around that. And I believe that as I stand up here tonight. And we have a terrible nursing crisis out in Southern California right now, and we're working our butts off, let me tell you. And I'm always the first one to complain about it, I'm sorry to say. And this one particular week I want to talk to you about, I had worked 72 hours this one particular week. And you know, we're like when we're too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. I was a bitch is what I was. And I'd been to a meeting earlier in the evening. I worked the night shift there, and I was off that night, and I was so glad I was off. And I went to a meeting, I went home, and I went to bed early. And the phone rang about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was my boss. And my boss makes Clancy look like a pussycat, I can tell you. And this woman's probably the best nurse I've ever seen before in my life. And one of these days when I grow up, maybe I'll be just like her. And she said, Karen, I know you're off tonight. I know you're not on call tonight. I know that you've worked 72 hours. And I really don't care. I have got 18 people sick over here tonight. I need your help. I need you to come to work. We're going to do a liver transplant on a little girl that's about 3 years old. And I need you to come over here. And I tried to tell her, I am too tired to come. I have been bled white, for Christ's sakes. And she hung up on me is what she did. And, you know, my sponsor has taught me to do what's in front of me, you guys, and not debate it. And I was going to call Clancy, but I don't want to talk to him about anything at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I just went to work, and I'm so glad that I did, because the most precious thing happened to me. And I got over there, and I sent my orderly upstairs to get our little patient, bring her down. And we had a jet coming in from the East Coast with a liver for this child. We had some time to kill. And he brought this little girl down to surgery. And he said, Karen, you're not going to believe all the people with this family. And I thought to myself, well, that's nice that they have the support. I was so crabby and stuff. And I went out front to get our little patient and stuff. And the first thing I noticed was about 50 to 75 people. And they were with this family. And I thought, how strange all these people here at 4 o'clock in the morning. But that's nice that the family has the support and stuff. And the next thing I noticed was the mother. She had the most beautiful blue eyes I have ever seen before in my life. And the dad was good looking and stuff. And then I looked down at my little patient. And I got to tell you guys that Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me to love at a level that I never, ever, ever dreamt possible for myself. And I fell in love with this little girl, and she was so sick she could not even lift her head off the pillow. She was so sick, and she was dying from some strange liver ailment and stuff. And she had a little bear in her arms, and she was hanging on to this bear for dear life, I got to tell you. And she had a blanket wrapped around this bear. And I said, oh, you brought your little bear down to surgery. And she tried to tell me that her little bear was going to have a liver transplant. And he was so scared that she came down to be with him when he was going to have surgery. And I said, oh, you're both going to have one. And she said, no, just the bear. Anyway, we sent the family out to the waiting room, and they were in absolute hysterics, you guys, and obviously. And the little girl looked at me, and she said, "Why is my mommy crying? Go tell my mommy not to cry." And I said, "Your mommy's crying, and you guys have taught me to say this, to tell people the truth." And I said to her, "Your mommy's crying because she loves you so much and stuff." And it was a very emotional thing for me. And she said, "Please tell my mommy not to cry." And we couldn't do anything about that. And anyway, we put that little girl to sleep. And I can tell you guys that liver transplant did not go well. We almost lost that baby a couple times due to blood loss and things. But she did, in fact, survive that 16-hour liver transplant. I have never seen an operating room team pull together like the people pulled together for that baby. And 90 units of blood later, we sent the little girl back up to her room to begin that long, long road to recovery. And you know, we have a rule at UCLA. You may not get involved with these transplant patients because they don't want to know where the organs come from, and we cannot tell them. And it's best not to see them. And I don't need to tell anybody in this room tonight that I'm real good at breaking rules now, aren't I? And, you know, I was obsessed with this child, and I just had to see how she was doing. And I made a plan to myself. You know, it's 6 days later. She's 6 days post-op from that transplant. I'm going to go up to her room, and I'm going to open her door, and I'm not going to talk to anybody. I just wanted to see how she was doing. And that's exactly what I did. And I opened the door to that child's room. And you guys, I could not believe what was in front of my face. My God, the power of God, the power of God. Here was this little girl. It was the first time she'd been up since her surgery. And she was jumping up and down in her crib. Once little kids get up, they get up real quick, let me tell you. And she had that bear in her arm, one arm, and she had a baby bottle in the other hand. And she had put Band-Aids all over this bear. He had Band-Aids in his eyes, his ears, his nose, and I mean everywhere. And that whole room full of people were in there, and the mom and dad were just tears of joy rolling down their cheeks and stuff. And something caught my eye out of the corner of my eye. And I'll be damned if our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, wasn't sitting on that kid's dresser. Now, if you think I was going to stay out of that room, I didn't care if I got fired. And I was in that room like a flash, and I said to the mother, "Whose book is that?" And she said, "Well, that's my book." And she said, "I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and so is my husband." And you guys, her sponsor was there, and his sponsor was there. Those people were all AA members, and they had driven 500 miles to be with this family. And I got to tell you that they showed me one more time what this thing is all about. It's about love and service. And I was impressed, let me tell you. And I went over to the mother and I said, "How long have you been sober?" And she said, 5 years today. And I thought, oh, wow, what a great present, her little girl up for the first time and stuff. And I walked over to the little girl, and this little girl looked at me, and she stopped dead in her tracks. And she said, "Go away, I'm not sick anymore." And, you know, I had my surgery stuff on, and it scared the hell out of her is what it did. And if I'd known I was going in the room, I certainly would have changed clothes and stuff. And I said, "I'm not up here to hurt you. I just came up to see how you were doing and stuff." And you guys, she handed me her little bear, and she said, "You take him home and take care of him, because he's so sick he needs a nurse to take care of him." And I tried to tell the mother, "I cannot take that bear home. My God, that bear went through this kid's liver transplant. You really need to keep it as a memento." And she said, "Karen, please take it. She wants you to have it. She's got 50 bears in here. Please take it home with you." And I felt like a fool walking down the hall with that bear. But I'll tell you what, that bear is my most prized possession in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought to myself, what can I do to reciprocate here? It's the mother's birthday. I obviously was not prepared for a birthday party. And I remember what was in my pocket that my sponsor had given me when I was 5 years sober. It was a medallion for 5 years of sobriety. I was 7.5 years sober when this happened, you guys. And I had hung onto that medallion for 2 years too long, I can tell you. And we say in Alcoholics Anonymous that we have got to give it away to keep it. We got to give it away. And I could not seem to find the person that was special enough, in my opinion, to give my medallion to. And I knew that I had found the person that was special enough. And I went over to this woman, and I said, "I want you to have my 5-year medallion." And she said, "Oh, Karen, I can't take that." I told her the history of that medallion. And she said, "My God, Clancy gave you that. Please keep it. I just really can't take it." I said, "Please take it. I want you to have it." And I really, really meant that, you guys. I wanted the woman to have what was so freely given to me. And I can tell you that the nurses got wind of all this, and we got a cake for that mother, and we celebrated her 5 years of sobriety at UCLA. And I got on the telephone, and I called my sponsor, and I said, "These people are all here. Let's do something with them." And he said, "I'm going to get about 50 cars over there. We're going to take those people to the Pacific Group tonight, and we're going to have a picnic in my backyard." And within 1 hour, there was 50 cars full of Pacific Group people out picking those people up. We had a wonderful picnic in Clancy's backyard. And I was so proud, you guys. I was so proud to take those people to my home group in Alcoholics Anonymous that night. That had to be the most magnificent day of my entire life, I got to tell you. And I need to also tell you that I came full circle that day with Alcoholics Anonymous, with my profession, and with my disease and the whole business. It was wrapped up in one package for me. And I knew I was right where I needed to be, right when I needed to be there. And I can tell you, I'll never forget those people. There's been no more contact with them. It's got to be that way for many, many reasons. But I understand that that little girl is doing very, very well. You guys have done so much for me that I cannot even begin to tell you how much I love you. And you know, people say to me all the time, why do you keep doing all this stuff, going to all these meetings, sponsoring all these people, all the things that you do? And I know of no greater thing to say to them, so that this to the end, that my great blessings may never spoil me, that I may forever live in thankful contemplation of him who presides over us all. And there's more reasons than that for me. You guys are the ones that walked with me when nobody else would walk with me. You held my hand when nobody else would hold my hand. And you told me that you loved me. And I need you as desperately tonight from this podium as I needed you in 1982. And you've taught me how to live. You've taught me how to love. You've taught me how to keep my pants up and all those things, you know. And I don't do any of those things very well. But I'll tell you the one thing that I do with 200% absolute perfection, and that is this, that I love you more than anything in the whole world. If you're new in this room tonight, I'll tell you what Alcoholics Anonymous is. Alcoholics Anonymous is a place that we come and we laugh when we're miserable and we cry when we're happy, and we call it AA. And the language of the heart is spoken here, and that language of the heart has kept me walking this path for the last 9.5 years of my sobriety. And I can tell you guys that I am so grateful. You have taken a broken woman off a skid row, and you have truly given me, just like the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, you have truly given me the keys to the kingdom. And I can tell you that it has been one hell of a long walk from Skid Row, Nebraska, to where I stand tonight in Hagerstown, Maryland. And I think that but for the grace of God and Alcoholics Anonymous, that I would have missed it all. Thank you for having me, and thank you for my life. That's all.